Hi guys, and welcome back to the Crawl Corner. Unfortunately, we're not back in this wonderful ranty corner for all things Formula E just yet. There is no Formula E for another few months, unfortunately. We have to wait until December, the end of the year, before the first round falls upon us for season 11. But we are in this wonderful corner nonetheless, because it is time to review my constructors predictions that I did at the start of the season. So those that are involved and interested in Formula E would have noticed about 7-8 months ago, prior to the first race of the season, and solely based on what we saw in the winter testing programme, I gave my constructors predictions based on how I thought this season would go as a whole. So it was a very bold prediction to make indeed, and this episode we're going to find out how right or wrong I was. So we'll find out, see whether I got any in the right place, see whether I got any drastically wrong. And the people in the comment section that were there 8 months ago, go back and look at your comments there, see how close and how right or wrong you were with the season as a whole. It'd be really interesting to see how close or far away we all were. But yeah, let's get stuck in with my first one. So 11th place for me, I placed the ERT squad, and that is exactly where they finished in the standings. Unfortunately, they did finish in last in the standings. 23 points on the board, Sete Camera with 11, Dan Tinkton with 12. Doesn't quite show the true picture though in terms of the drivers this season. Dan Tinkton, you just look at that and think 12, great effort. He only scored points once with a 4th place finish, inherited from a 6th place finish that got bumped up to 4th. But yeah, Sete Camera was certainly the more consistent driver this year. He really, really was. He was picking up, I think he had a 6th, and then he had a couple of 8ths and 9ths and 10ths. So although he only scored 1 less point than Dan Tinkton, he was a lot more consistent, a lot closer to points, a lot better qualifying efforts. But unfortunately, the ERT squad is lacking a massive amount of funding. They did look really consistent in the middle part of that season, where it was the Sete Camera 9th and 10th, and you think, okay, they keep chipping away at that, they're going to do well. They only got as high as 9th in the standings, unfortunately, after a crazy Mazzano race. And after that, they did fall away. Points were rarely picked up from there, and that meant that the other two cars and other two teams that were behind them at the time finished ahead of them. So yeah, 11th place. Didn't really expect anything other than that, unfortunately. But they did have signs, and some good signs, encouraging signs, throughout the season. But yes, ERT, I predicted 11th, and they did indeed finish in 11th. In 10th place, I placed Mahindra. And in real life, they did indeed finish 10th as well. Very nip and tuck, though, towards the end of the season with the other team that finished ahead of them in the end. It was very, very close. And to be honest, the other team that did just finish ahead of them in 9th place could have had a lot better result in the end. But we're talking about Mahindra for now, and it has been refreshing to see how good Mortara has been this season. Although finishing 10th in the standings, you think that's a bit of a down and out, bit of a, there's not much to celebrate, not much to cheer. Well, for me personally, Mortara has made that step up again after a very difficult season 9 in the Maserati team, where all he was doing was finding walls and finding other drivers to crash into. This time around, this season, he has done a stunning job. He's really delivered the goods for the Mahindra team. There's been a lot of unluckiness where he's been caught up in accidents and incidents and disqualifications after finishing inside the points, like in Tokyo, where points were possible. Points were possible, points were achieved at times, and they just were taken away, or it didn't quite work out right. He got roughed up. He had an unfortunate contact at Portland when he would have easily been on for points based on the first race results. We had London, of course, where he was taken out by Jake Dennis in that final race. That sort of summed up the unluckiness of his season. He had some great qualifying performance, some great races, but it very rarely came fully together for Mortara. But it wasn't his fault, so he did a great job. He really did a great job. Nick de Vries returning to Formula E in his first season in the Gen 3 era car. It was difficult because there was hardly any rookies on the grid this season, so it meant that he really effectively was a rookie, despite him being a champion in the Gen 2 era and him having Formula E experience, of course. The Gen 3 era was totally a different kettle of fish. It did take him a good few rounds, a little bit longer than I would have expected him to get to adapt to that Formula E car, but towards the end of the season he was matching and beating Mortara a lot more and started picking up some good points. So it's interesting to see what will happen next season with Mahindra. I believe both drivers have been retained, if I remember rightly, But if De Vries is still there, I think he'll hit the ground running for season 11 because he's had that 1 year experience with the Gen 3 now. We're going to the Gen 3 Evo era into season 11, which will be encouraging as well for him. So he starts with a bit more experience under his belt. Both drivers driving really well. Let's see how the Mahindra drivers get on for season 11. But yes, for this prediction, I predicted them finishing 10th. They did in fact finish 10th for Mahindra. 9th place, I predicted Apt Cupra, another car with the Mahindra powertrain in the back of it, and indeed they did finish in 9th. But as you mentioned me there earlier, speaking about the other team that they just lost out to 9th in the standings, it could have been a hell of a lot more for that Apt Cupra squad. Had you had 2 Nico Mullers in that car, in both cars, 2 Nico Muller quality drivers, they could have easily finished 7th in the standings, maybe even 6th. Maybe even 6th. Nico Muller achieving 52 points or somewhere around there anyway, whereas Di Grassi scored just 4. And not only that for Lucas Di Grassi, 3 of those 4 points came post-race from penalties for other drivers. So London, for example, he crossed the line 10th, elevated to 9th. There was another situation where he crossed the line in 11th, got elevated to 10th due to a De Costa disqualification. It's so much. So yeah, he scores 4. He scored 2 of those in the London race right at the end of the season, doubling his points tally. But you look back at it, you see the post-race penalties. Di Grassi scored just 1 point on merit this whole season. Which is crazy, isn't it? So yeah, he ends with 4, scored 1 on merit, 3 after the fact. So a very difficult year for him, for Di Grassi, and if you'd have put 52 and 52 together, 104, that would have put them 7th in the standings. And if you'd have had the likes of 2 Nico Mullers, there would be no reason why they couldn't have gone for the Envision squad as well at that point, who finished 6th in the standings. So yeah, a difficult year for Apt Cupra. It's a season of what could have been for them. They weren't the quickest at the start of the season by any stretch of the imagination. They weren't realistically going to get anything better than 7th, but with 2 really decent drivers, they could have pushed for 6th. As it was, they were lucky in the end to secure 9th. So yeah, I predicted Apt Cupra 9th. They did in fact finish 9th, but I didn't think it would have been a season of what could have been for them in finishing 9th. I really did think that was the maximum they get out of the season. But you look back at it, there was a lot left on the table. So I'm correct with Apt Cupra, 9th to them. In 8th place, I predicted McLaren would finish 8th in the standings. They did actually finish 7th in the standings. So we're not going to talk about them just yet. We're going to speak about the team that did actually finish 8th, which was Maserati. So Maserati finishing 8th in the standings. I was 1 position out with that prediction there. I thought Maserati were going to finish 7th. They did in fact finish 8th. So yeah, so the team that did finish 8th was Maserati. This again is very, very unlucky to see them so far down here in 8th in the standings. The rookie Jahan Daravella really didn't deliver towards the end of the season. He was unlucky though in the London races, admittedly taken out twice while points were possible. So it did look like he had an encouraging end to the season, but I think it's a little bit too little too late for him, to be honest. There were races where you saw flashes of brilliance quite early on in the season, such as Saudi Arabia, the second race there. You know, 2 races at the same track. He was running around inside the points, right on the fringes of the points as well. And unfortunately then he had a brake-by-wire issue and went down the escape road. That wasn't his fault. Maybe a point could have been scraped there. But you think, okay, encouraging. Then he has a dip in form again. He's absolutely nowhere. Portland, just a couple of races before, obviously, the London E-Prix doubleheader at the end. Nowhere. Comes to London, has chance of points, doesn't score him because he gets taken out. So there is a little bit more. 8 points on the board for Jahan Daravella at the end of the season. Doesn't show the 2 picture. I do honestly believe that that should maybe be around 20 points. But even so, there were some races where he really didn't turn up and you forgot he was even in the race. So it was a difficult first rookie year for Jahan Daravella, but we'll see how he goes for next year. I think he's going to be picked up by someone else, if I remember rightly, but I might be wrong. But nonetheless, it's going to be a totally new driver lineup at Maserati for next year. But speaking of Maxi Gunter, the other driver in that car for season 10, and drove really, really well at the start of the season, looking like he was going to be a championship contender. Threw it all away at Berlin. 2 front wing issues where he knocked his car sillily into the back of another car and put himself in the wall with the wing stuck underneath it. Was very, very unfortunate. And then from there, didn't really find his feet. We got to London though, however, where Maserati did look strong, and again, Maserati and Max Gunter, no luck whatsoever. Gearbox failure in the first race whilst running in a podium place, and whilst fighting for a podium place in that final race, was caught out by Nick Cassidy having a right rear puncture and trying to scrabble into the pits. There was a big gaggle of cars, and unfortunately Maxi Gunter got turned into while someone else was trying to take evasive action, ripped his front wing off and stuffed him into the wall, into another retirement. So again, Maserati, more points were possible. Had they achieved those points that they should have scored in London, we could have seen them finish 6th in the standings, but as it was, here they are in 8th, which is very unfortunate. So it doesn't tell the true picture of the pace of the Maserati. The first start of the season, I really thought I was drastically wrong with my prediction of 7th. As it was, they actually finished 8th. So yeah, Maserati 8th in the actual standings, 7th I predicted. And then we come to my 8th place prediction, who actually finished 7th. So we're going to talk about them now. It is McLaren. So yeah, McLaren, unfortunately for them, I didn't expect many things from them. I did believe that Sam Bird was going to be the main issue for the season for them, as to why I felt they were going to finish 8th in the standings. But as it was, they finished 7th. But it's still not impressive, is it? Sam Bird did take a victory. He had one win, which was fantastic to see early in the season. But then after securing those 25 points, the rest of the season only picked up 11 for the remainder of the season. Very, very difficult indeed. Jake Hughes was having a similar unfortunate event. He was really lacking pace at times. It was very inconsistent from the McLaren squad. But what really showed Jake up and Sam Bird up was when Sam Bird suffered his wrist injury, unfortunately so. Taylor Barnard stepped in to take over, obviously, in that Sam Bird seat. Had a really good Monaco, didn't stuff it in the wall at any points, finished the race in P13. Then we got to the double header at Berlin and secured points. He ended up finishing 5 points in the end of this from just 3 rounds. So he had a really impressive run, did Taylor Barnard. A good effort indeed by him. And that was at a time where, you know, Sam Bird wasn't scoring any points prior to his wrist injury. Jake Hughes didn't score any points either. So it really showed there was more pace in that McLaren car than the drivers let on, to be honest, and the drivers got out of it, more importantly. Next season, of course, it will be Sam Bird and Taylor Barnard alongside each other, confirmed for season 11, which is nice to see. Taylor getting a go. It means he does finish his F2 season prematurely with the Ajax Grand Prix team, but that's how it has to be, isn't it? So yeah, next season we'll see, but this time around, I predicted them finish 8th. They did in fact finish 7th. My 6th place prediction was Nissan. No, I was quite wrong with that actually. They ended up finishing the season in 4th, so we'll come back to them in a moment. And now we're going to speak about the actual 6th place finishers, which was Envision. Oh my god. I don't really know if I should really go into much detail about this, because I have spoken about it in great detail on many episodes now about the Envision squad, and my oh my, how difficult has it been this season for them. I predicted them 3rd in the standings. Third in the standings. Even then I was saying, I know they were last year's champions, but I think they might not have the pace all the time. I really didn't expect it to go this badly for them. They started so strongly. Podium and a podium, great. One for France, one for Buemi. So a good couple of points finish as well for the other car in the meantime. An 8th, a 9th, something like that. Not as impressive, but still points. And then we just had this barren run of absolutely nothing, or certainly next to nothing. Just maybe an odd point here or there. You had the likes of Joel Eriksson coming in and securing some points while, you know, the other main drivers are away, while they'd not been scoring points forever and a day. So again, was it the drivers? Was it the car? Was it a combination of both? And then we get to Portland. It's a double podium weekend for Robin Freitz. We get to London, it's a podium for Buemi and a P4 finish again. So they had pace at the end, they had pace at the beginning, and there was a big barren spell in the middle where virtually nothing was collected in terms of points or anything respectable whatsoever. So a big shame, a big disappointment for Envision. Last year's champions here finishing 6th in the standings with 120 points or something like that. Not good at all, and very disappointing. And there's not really much more I can add to that. It's just been a very difficult season for them, and in some aspects, lucky to finish 6th. Maserati's bad luck certainly cost them from Berlin onwards, and Gunter getting a little bit silly and a bit overdrivey at times. McLaren, again, there was certainly a lot left on the table there. At Cooper, there was a lot left on the table there, with one car only scoring the points towards the end when the car was at its best. They were lucky they weren't ninth this season. I think they'll take sixth with both hands, because they were very, very low in the standings at one point, because every other team was scoring points except them. That's how bad it got. I think they were down to 9th or 10th in the standings at one point. It got that bad. So yeah, Envision, I predicted them to finish 3rd. They actually finished 6th, which is crazy, isn't it? But yeah, very, very disappointing year for Envision. A lot of head scratching, I'm sure. 5th place, my prediction was DS Penske. Unfortunately, it wasn't. I was close though with that one. The actual finishing in 5th place was Andretti. Andretti, last year's Drivers' Champions. And yeah, I said with Norman Nato alongside, maybe, just maybe, the Andretti squad could do a little bit more, but they couldn't. The pace of the single one-lap pace had just gone begging. They had one pole position this year at Berlin, but the rest of the time they were very, very, very lucky to get through into the head-to-head qualifying section, weren't they? Because more often than not, they were knocked out in the group stages, which is very, very disappointing indeed. Norman Nato only securing a few points here and there. Was unlucky at times though. Kept getting himself involved with Sasha Fenestraz in the Nissan at times. Seemed to build up a budding relationship with him on making sure they had contact in every race given. Jake Dennis drove very erratically at London, for example. No points at all picked up there because he kept crashing like a womble and picking up penalties and hitting everyone and hitting the whole world. Frustration had sank in with the team. Frustration had clearly set in with the drivers as well. And it meant that it was a very much a meh season, to be honest with you, for them. Finishing 5th in the standings is certainly disappointing. They did have a better second driver compared to Lotterer the previous year, of course. But overall, very disappointing, very, very gutting indeed to see them so far down the order. Jake Dennis losing his, of course, driver's title, but he lost that himself with a lot of hot-headedness. And Norman Nato, a respectable second driver. I do think he did deserve a second chance in that season 11. He was offered it, but he didn't accept it, so whatever happened there happened. But yeah, overall, Andretti, disappointing to see him so far down the order, but a combination of team and driver issues, I feel. In 4th place, I predicted Andretti would finish here, and they didn't, did they? It was Nissan that finished 4th in the standings. That's quite good. That's quite impressive indeed, actually. Nissan, again, this is a bit like the At Cooper situation. Where could they have been with 2 Ollie Rowlands in both their cars? Because Ollie Rowland drove superbly this season. The fact that he was still within a mathematical shout of the championship going into that London doubleheader, despite the fact he missed Portland out completely due to an ear infection and wasn't able to fly, that's very, very impressive to me and shows the level of consistency he had. There was a run of podiums where he just could not stop finishing on the podium, and what gave up that run? A team error that was calculated wrong for the final lap of the Misano race, the doubleheader there, that Misano race where he was leading by a good 6-7 seconds, and he was on the last half a lap and his car ran out of charge. It was a miscalculation by the team. Something went wrong between the communication between the car and the pit wall, which meant they thought they had more energy than they actually did, and the car just conked out at the line when it should have been another victory. So you add that 25 points to it. You say you had a couple of third and a 5th place, another 25 points for the Portland E-Prix. He could have easily been champion there. 50 points missing, stick it on there. He could have been champion, and he wasn't, and it was very unlucky indeed. We only saw the real true Ollie Rowland at the penultimate round, of course, at London, where he stuffed it into the side of Da Costa, but then in the next race went on and won the bloody thing. So yeah, frustration setting in at times, but for the most part, Ollie Rowland was absolutely sublime. As for Sasha Fenestraz, a difficult second year for him. He's not a rookie anymore now. And he had a very horrible year this year. There was no excuse for it. It was actually worse than his rookie season. I'm not sure if it was actually worse in terms of points, but based on where that car and performance and the pace of that car should have been, rarely picking up points while his teammates winning, and if he's not winning, he's certainly on the podium. It's bizarre situation. So yeah, Sasha Fenestraz, again, had he been like an Ollie Rowland, they could have easily challenged for the drivers for the team's title. I'm not saying they would have won it, but I'm certainly saying they could have been up there and they could have been fighting for it. So yeah, 4th place to Nissan. Again, could have been more, but Ollie Rowland, the main breadwinner. In 3rd place, I placed Envision, and I thought that was quite a step down from being the winners of the team's title last year. And based on their pace in mid-season testing as well, let's not forget that, in pre-season testing, they did look good. The start of the season, strongly. So, I wasn't that mad. with predicted him third and they actually finished sixth. But no, the team that actually did finish third in the standings was DS Penske, which was an encouraging sign to see. I predicted DS Penske to actually finish fifth, so the fact that they're third is very, very impressive indeed. And again, like most of the teams, the main breadwinner for the points was Jean-Eric Vergne. It was down to one car. Stoffel Vandoorne, very, very difficult year, very hit and miss. He was more consistent than some of the other second drivers though. While his teammate was on the podium and securing like a fourth or fifth place finish, more often than not, Vandoorne was there in 9th or 10th or 8th maybe at a push. So he was at least collecting something, but it was still very few and far between and not enough to really challenge for the team's title. Again, 2 Jevs in that car. It'd have been a thrilling battle up front, probably a thrilling battle for the drivers' standings as well. Jev went into the last round of the season mathematically in with the shot of the title, which is fantastic considering that towards the beginning of that season there was a little period where that car wasn't that good and Jev were only really mustering up a few points place finishes, an 8th or 9th here and there, and Vandoorne was well outside of them. So, you know, if DS Penske can really get their act together like they looked to be doing towards the end of the season, if they can carry that into season 11, there's no reason why Jev and DS Penske can't challenge for the teams and drivers title. Vandoorne moving to pastures new, over to Maserati now, so someone else will be lining up alongside Jev. We'll see who that is. But yeah, ultimately, DS Penske, a great surprise this year. Very consistent in the hands of Jean-Eric Vergne, certainly. Just lacking that overall pace a little bit to attack the Porsche powertrain and the Jaguar powertrains, but still doing a great job with the Stellantis powertrain in the back of it. Certainly more consistent overall, but again, a dominant lead driver. And the poorer quality of a second driver who's a champion in Formula E. Let's not forget that with Stoffel Vandoorne. You know, it certainly is. He's just not gelled to the Gen 3 era as well as we maybe all predicted him to. But yeah, overall, fantastic season by DS Penske. I predicted them 5th. They actually finished in 3rd. Second place, I predicted Porsche, and indeed it was Porsche. Of course it was. It had to be, didn't it? Runners up this season, Pascal Wehrlein and Da Costa, and the main thing that cost Porsche this season for the team's title overall was the sluggish start that Da Costa had to his season overall. It was a shame to say that, but it is true. But when Da Costa found his feet and got on form, my oh my did he do well. 4 races in a row with victories, of course. Taking a victory at Misano, cruelly disqualified. That was unfortunate as well. That certainly didn't help towards the team standings for the Porsche squad. Disqualifications and penalties to Da Costa that were maybe harsh, unfair, unjust compared to other penalties or lack of penalties received by other drivers for similar situations like on-track collisions. He did get a lot of penalties towards the end of the year and a lot of points were lost there in that way. So yeah, Da Costa, slow start to the season, but then when he found his feet, he did have a string of 4 wins in a row, absolutely sublime, but there were still areas and elements where then he did have the pace, but the FIA decided they were going to take him away from him and take some good results away from him as well. So, yeah, did cost him the title overall. As for Pascal Wehrlein, of course, we know he's the actual drivers' champion overall, so was the highest scoring driver this season, which is a fantastic effort. But again, whilst Da Costa was doing those run of 4 wins, it was very rare that Wehrlein was up there with him. It was mainly like a 9th or an 8th or a 7th, maybe a 5th, you know, but wasn't up there with him on the podium. And you think, well, if Da Costa's found this pace to win, surely Wehrlein will be on the podium. So despite the fact that Wehrlein had a stunning season, I'm not doubting that at all or whatsoever. There was maybe just a little bit there where he was thinking more about his own championship as opposed to the team's title. And again, I think it all adds up at the end of the year. You'll look at the missed opportunities that Da Costa had at the start of the year to pick up points and think, well, yeah, he just weren't driving good enough. Then you'll look at Da Costa's lost results due to bullshit penalties and harsh disqualifications. And you think, well, that'll certainly contribute. And then you can look at Wehrlein and go, towards the end of that season, there were periods there where we were just happy to pick up an odd 1 or 2, whereas if he could have pushed himself a little bit higher up, again, it could have been more points on the board and could have been the title for Porsche. But as it was, great season for Porsche, runners-up in the team standings, and a driver's champion to go with it as well. So congratulations to Porsche. Yeah, I predicted them 2nd. Here they are, finishing 2nd. And in 1st place, by no surprise to absolutely anyone, it is the Jaguar squad of Mitch Evans and Nick Cassidy. But what is surprising is, yeah, they are team's champion. I, of course, predicted that, as I'm sure everyone did as well. A great driver lineup there, but what is most disappointing and infuriating is that neither of those drivers picked up the drivers' standings. picked up the driver's title. It is very, very bizarre and very unfortunate to say that, but that is the truth, unfortunately for them. They just had a scruffy time of it, didn't they? They really did. They fell over each other towards the end of the season, particularly in that London final race where it was advantage Cassidy, taken out by Da Costa, then it was advantage Evans, and then he missed his attack mode, and that meant that it was advantage Verline. We saw the late spin, of course, about in the Portland E-Prix for Nick Cassidy, where that would have been a 25-point advantage, would have taken him into the final race with final 2 races with a 30-point lead as opposed to just a 7 in the end, or whatever it was, something crazy anyway. And then of course you look at the likes of Mitch Evans' start to the season where he was overdriving, driving erratically, trying to prove a point that he wanted to be the lead Jaguar driver. There was team orders in between each team and driver as well, where it always seemed that they were trying to favour Evans even though he wasn't the fastest car at that time. So there was bizarre radio calls and team orders to Cassidy that Cassidy always obeyed. Cassidy always obeyed them, and it was very, very strange to see. So ultimately that cost Cassidy the title, obeying those team orders. And then when Evans was told to obey team orders in that final race, he didn't do that and did his own thing, and ended up costing both of their drivers, both Jaguar drivers, a chance at the title, including himself, which is bizarre. So yeah, they are teams champions. Hallelujah to them. They thoroughly deserved it. But my oh my, did they drop the ball, both driver and team, because they should have had one of their drivers ultimately winning that drivers' championship, and it didn't happen, which is crazy. And it shows you how consistent the drivers were, because they finished 2nd and 3rd in the standings and were able, of course, to take that team's title to the Jaguar squad. And yeah, ultimately didn't come to nothing, but at least in this list anyway, I'm correct. I predicted them first, they finished first. Well done to Jaguar. So anyway then guys, those were my rundown of my 11 predictions, of course. How I thought the team standing would go at the end of the season. And I wasn't too far away actually. I only really got Envision really wrong. But apart from that, I didn't do too badly at all. As always, let me know down below where you predicted the teams to finish. And did you get any wrong? Did you get any absolutely spot on? I ended up with 5 right there. The top 2 and the bottom 3. I got Maserati and McLaren round the wrong way. Envision was really wrong. Andretti only got 1 wrong position with. And of course, the DS Penske squad, I was 2 places out. So I didn't do too badly at all. Thank you so much for watching, guys. And as always, much love.